Riley Carter paused at the base of the towering Cross Industries building, her reflection shimmering in the glass like a distorted question mark, daring her to step forward. The morning sun glinted off the steel and glass facade, a fortress of power and ambition, and Riley felt a mixture of awe and trepidation. At 24, with a freshly minted business degree that had opened more doors to disappointment than opportunity, she had exactly $47 in her checking account and a heart full of stubborn determination. Her mother's health was declining rapidly, and her father worked endless hours behind the wheel of a delivery truck, carrying the weight of medical bills that seemed to grow heavier by the day. This job temporary placement as executive secretary to Damian Cross was not just a lifeline, it was a gamble that might change everything. Riley adjusted her blazer, took a deep breath, and stepped into the lobby. The moment she entered, she was swallowed by the building's grandeur. Marble floors stretched into infinity, modern art installations twisted toward the ceiling like living sculptures, and every surface gleamed with a perfection that suggested armies of people worked tirelessly to maintain it. It was intimidating, yes, but thrilling in a way that made her pulse quicken. This was not just a workplace, it was a stage for power, and she had been cast in a role she did not yet understand. Miss Carter, a voice, precise and commanding, cut through the ambient hum of the lobby. Mrs. Preston, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, stood waiting. Her posture was impeccable, her presence almost militaristic. "Mr. Cross is expecting you." Riley nodded, swallowing a lump in her throat as she followed the woman toward the elevator. The ride up to the 42nd floor felt suspended in time. The city below seemed both distant and inconsequential, a reminder of the world Riley had grown up in, a world where she had always been chasing something just out of reach. But here, in this elevator, she felt herself approaching a new reality, one that could elevate her family from worry and exhaustion to security and hope. The doors opened to reveal an office that defied every expectation Riley had ever held about the corporate world. Instead of dark wood, leather, and intimidating decor, light spilled through floor-to-ceiling windows, reflecting off sleek metal surfaces and polished glass. The view of the city stretched endlessly, and the room radiated clarity, precision, and power. And at the center of it all sat Damian Cross. Riley had seen his photos, read his profile in business magazines, memorized every article that described his achievements, but none of it prepared her for the reality. He was 32, tall and impeccably poised, with storm gray eyes that seemed to pierce right through a person's facade. His dark hair was effortlessly styled, and the way he held himself suggested a man who was always 3 steps ahead, always in control. Yet he didn't glance up immediately as she entered. Instead, he continued reading from a tablet, his jaw tight with concentration. His presence so commanding it made the air itself seem to bend toward him. Riley's throat tightened. She had rehearsed every possible scenario for this moment: the polite introduction, the subtle charm, the professional calm, but none of her rehearsals prepared her for the intensity of his gaze. She cleared her throat softly. "Good morning, Mr. Cross," she ventured. He didn't look up. "Punctuality is non-negotiable," he said evenly. "It is now 9:03. Heat rushed to Riley's cheeks, but she held her stance. "I arrived at 8:50, she explained. "Your assistant had me wait in the lobby for 10 minutes because you were on a call." For the first time, Damian's stormy gray eyes lifted to meet hers. They were sharp, assessing, calculating, as though he were solving a complex equation and she was the variable. "Then perhaps you should inquire about Mrs. Preston's communication skills, rather than questioning mine," he replied, his tone neutral but edged with a quiet authority. The silence that followed was palpable. Riley felt the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. She had feared losing this opportunity before it began, yet something about the flicker in his eyes suggested amusement, curiosity, or perhaps both. "I'll sit," he said finally, nodding toward the chair across from his desk. As Riley lowered herself into the seat, she straightened her spine and folded her hands in her lap, conscious that every move mattered under his gaze. Damian leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin, observing her like a scientist studying a rare specimen. "Tell me why you need this job," he said. And the question struck deeper than any interview query ever had. She had expected inquiries about her qualifications, her experience, perhaps even her long-term goals, but this was different. This demanded honesty. Riley drew a deep breath. "My mother has early onset Alzheimer's," she said quietly. "The treatments are expensive, experimental, and not covered by insurance. My father works long hours driving deliveries to keep up with the bills. I graduated with a degree that seems to qualify me for nothing but debt. I need this job because without it, my family falls apart." Damien studied her. "At least you are honest," he said. "Most people waste my time with elaborate stories about career advancement or mutual benefit." "I believe in mutual benefit," Riley replied. "You need someone competent and reliable. And I need steady income and health insurance. That seems fairly straightforward." He slid a thick folder across the desk. "These are the expectations. Read them carefully. Sign if you agree. Leave if you do not." Riley opened it, scanning the pages densely packed with rules, restrictions, and demands. Availability 18 hours a day. No personal calls during work hours. Complete discretion regarding company matters. And a dress code that seemed more suitable for boardroom meetings than administrative work. She looked up at him, aware of the gravity of the commitment. "These terms are demanding," she said softly. "I am rather demanding," he replied without apology. "Success requires sacrifice. Those unwilling to sacrifice rarely achieve greatness." Riley swallowed and nodded. Something inside her hardened. She could not afford to falter. Not today, not ever. This was her chance not just to survive, but to stand her ground in a world that had demanded she bow too many times. As she signed the folder, a flicker of something unspoken passed between them: recognition, challenge, and perhaps the beginning of a battle neither would forget. Riley Carter had walked into Cross Industries a hopeful but cautious young woman. She would leave that room a force to be reckoned with, ready to meet power with courage, and defiance with unwavering resolve. And so her journey began, not just a story of ambition, but one of heart, resilience, and a refusal to bow down, no matter the cost. Riley's first night at Cross Industries left her mind racing long. After she returned to her tiny apartment, the city lights shimmered below, a sea of endless possibility. And yet she felt the weight of every expectation pressing on her shoulders. Damien Cross was not a man to be underestimated. Even in those first few minutes, his gaze had seemed to measure her soul, weighing her honesty, her resolve, and the quiet determination that refused to break under pressure. Most people would have crumbled under the intensity of that encounter. But Riley felt something else, a spark. It was early morning when she returned to the building, her fingers tightening around her coffee cup. The lobby felt different now, less like a palace of intimidation and more like a proving ground. Each step toward the elevators reminded her that this was not just a job. This was a test, a crucible designed to separate those who merely survived from those who thrived. "Miss Carter," Mrs. Preston's voice cut through her thoughts. "Mr. Cross is expecting you." Riley nodded and stepped into the elevator, heart hammering. The doors closed, and she took a moment to center herself. Today would be different. Today, she would begin to understand the unspoken rules of a world she had only glimpsed from afar. The office floor opened up like a stage, and Damien was already seated at his desk, tablet in hand. His presence was immediate, magnetic, almost overwhelming. But Riley noticed something new today, a subtle flicker of curiosity in his storm-gray eyes. It was as if he had not yet decided whether she would bend under pressure or stand firm. "Good morning, Mr. Cross," she said, keeping her voice calm and measured. He did not respond immediately, which was typical. Instead, he tapped at his tablet, scanning figures, graphs, and reports with a precision that bordered on obsession. Riley's eyes drifted to the city beyond the glass, but she quickly forced her focus back to the man in front of her. This was where her resolve would be tested, not by the tasks themselves, but by the silent, unyielding scrutiny of someone who expected nothing less than excellence. "Today will not be easy," Damien finally said, looking up. "I expect results, attention to detail, and the ability to anticipate needs before they are voiced." Riley nodded, Her hands clenched slightly in her lap. "Understood," she replied, the words carrying a weight she did not fully understand. Yet, she could feel the magnitude of the challenge ahead, but also the opportunity, the chance to prove, not just to him, but to herself, that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. Her first assignment was deceptively simple: organize Damien's schedule, ensure all communications were efficient, and prepare for a high-profile board meeting. Yet, as she began sorting through emails, calls, and requests, Riley realized that each task carried its own subtle complexities. One misstep could unravel hours of work, and the pressure to perform flawlessly was relentless. By mid-morning, Damien approached her desk. "Attention to detail, Miss Carter," he said quietly, not as a reprimand but as a reminder. A single overlooked item can cascade into disaster. Riley met his gaze. "I understand, sir. I won't let that happen." There was a pause, long enough for a new tension to settle between them, one that carried the promise of challenge and respect. Damien's eyes softened just slightly, a recognition that Riley was not a typical assistant. She was deliberate, focused, and unafraid to speak when necessary. It was rare in a world where most bent under his expectations, and Damien, who had seen countless ambitious individuals come and go, seemed to sense that she might endure where others failed. The hours passed in a whirlwind of emails, phone calls, and meticulous preparation for the upcoming board meeting. Riley discovered quickly that the work demanded not only intelligence, but intuition, the ability to predict needs before they were articulated. Each completed task brought a fleeting sense of triumph, countered immediately by the knowledge that perfection was expected not occasionally, but constantly. During a brief moment of quiet, Riley reflected on her journey. She had faced adversity before, but never on this scale. Her family's struggles had taught her resilience. Her own doubts had taught her perseverance. Here, in the heart of Cross Industries, she realized that resilience alone would not be enough. She needed strategy, foresight, and a courage that could withstand relentless scrutiny. The board meeting arrived, and Riley was tasked with coordinating every detail: documents, presentations, communications, and timing. She moved through the room with precision, her actions seamless, almost invisible, yet indispensable. Damien observed her quietly, noting every move, every decision. The meeting progressed smoothly, a testament not only to his leadership, but also to her emerging competence. After the meeting concluded, Damien motioned for her to stay. "You handled today well," he said, voice measured, "but this is only the beginning. You will be tested constantly, and there will be moments when you question whether you are enough." Riley met his gaze evenly. "I will not falter," she said, though inside, she felt the tremor of doubt, a reminder that even courage had its limits. Damien's expression softened ever so slightly. "Good, because those who endure, who stand their ground, are the ones who achieve more than they imagined possible." As Riley left the office that evening, the city lights glimmered beneath her like a promise. The challenge ahead was immense, but so was the opportunity. She had taken her first steps into a world that demanded everything and offered the reward of transformation for those brave enough to claim it. And in that moment, Riley Carter realized something vital. She was no longer just surviving. She was beginning to stand her ground, to face power with courage, challenge with resolve, and adversity with unwavering determination. The real journey had only just begun. The morning air carried a sharpness that made Riley straighten her shoulders as she approached the Cross Industries tower. It wasn't just the chill that made her take a deep breath. It was the knowledge that today would not be ordinary. Damien Cross had a way of turning routine into an arena where only the precise, the clever, and the unyielding could thrive. Riley felt a mix of anticipation and fear and adrenaline that promised growth, if she could survive its weight. As she entered the lobby, the glass and steel that had seemed intimidating before now appeared almost familiar. She knew the rhythm of the place, the subtle flow of power, and the unspoken hierarchies that governed every interaction. But familiarity didn't mean ease. Each step toward the elevator was a reminder that she was being watched, evaluated, and measured not just on what she did, but how she responded to pressure. "Miss Carter," Mrs. Preston called, her voice cutting through the low hum of activity. Riley lifted her chin and followed the silver-haired woman toward the elevator, feeling the gravity of expectation settle over her like a tangible weight. Every day here was a test of endurance, focus, and courage. The elevator hummed upward, and Riley let her mind wander briefly to her family. Her mother's illness, her father's relentless work schedule, and the tiny apartment that felt like the only space they had left it was a world of pressure that had shaped her resilience. But Damien's world was different, high stakes, sharp edges, and zero tolerance for error. She had to find balance between her personal drive and the professional demands pressing in from all sides. When the doors opened, Damien was already standing, reviewing documents at his desk with an intensity that made the air vibrate. He didn't look up immediately, and Riley allowed herself a small, steadying breath. She had learned patience in life, and today it would serve her well. "Good morning, Mr. Cross," she said, voice steady. He glanced up, his gray eyes scanning her quickly but with more consideration than usual. "We have a situation," he said. His tone was even, but the slight tension in his jaw suggested that this was serious. "An important client meeting has been rescheduled, and I need you to reorganize everything immediately. No errors, no delays." Riley's mind clicked into focus. Tasks that would seem simple to others were loaded with potential pitfalls here. One misplaced file, one forgotten detail, and the consequences could ripple far beyond her own reputation. She nodded, her fingers tightening around her notepad. "I'll handle it, sir." Damien observed silently, as if weighing her words against her potential. Riley could feel his scrutiny like a physical presence pressing against her back. She was used to being tested, but this was different. This was power at its most refined, demanding intelligence, precision, and courage all at once. Hours passed like a whirlwind. Riley moved seamlessly between calls, messages, and documents, anticipating Damien's needs before he voiced them. Every decision required thought, every movement calculated. She noticed small details others might overlook: a client's preference for a specific seating arrangement, the timing of refreshments, even the way documents were stacked to ensure flow during presentations. It was exhausting, exhilarating, and terrifying all at once. By mid-afternoon, a crisis emerged. A critical presentation file had not synced correctly across devices, threatening to derail the meeting. Riley's heart skipped, but she didn't panic. Instead, she quickly assessed the problem, traced the error, and coordinated a solution that ensured the client would never know there had been a risk. Damien, watching from across the room, raised a brow not in criticism, but in acknowledgement. Riley felt a small flicker of satisfaction. She had met the challenge without hesitation, proving to herself that she could stand under pressure and still deliver results. After the meeting concluded successfully, Damien called her into his office. "You handled that well," he said, voice measured. "But remember, this is the baseline. You will face more complex challenges, and some will test not just your skill, but your character. How you respond under pressure will define you more than any task you complete." Riley nodded, absorbing every word. She understood the truth in it. Talent alone was not enough. Courage, resilience, and the ability to rise when everything seemed stacked against her were equally vital. As she left the office, Riley felt a strange combination of exhaustion and exhilaration. She had survived a trial that would have overwhelmed many, but more importantly, she had done so while maintaining her composure and integrity. This was the beginning of a transformation, a journey that would challenge every part of her, but also reveal strengths she had not yet recognized in herself. Walking back to her apartment that evening, the city lights twinkled below, and Riley allowed herself a small, private smile. The road ahead would be difficult, perhaps the most demanding she had ever faced, but she felt an unfamiliar thrill. She was ready to meet every challenge, rise above every expectation, and prove that standing her ground was not just possible, it was her destiny. And somewhere deep inside, Riley knew that the trials to come would not just test her skills or patience. They would test her heart, her resolve, and her courage, and she was determined not to falter, no matter the stakes. The office was unusually quiet that morning. a stillness that seemed almost unnatural in a place where every second pulsed with urgency. Riley Carter stepped off the elevator. The hum of the city below a distant murmur compared to the storm she could feel building inside her. Today was not just another day of schedules, emails, and coordination. It was a test of endurance, judgment, and courage. Damian Cross had summoned her personally, and the rare summons carried weight. The subtle tension in the air made her chest tighten, and yet, beneath the anxiety, a spark of determination flared. As Riley approached his office, she reminded herself of the countless challenges she had already overcome: the fear of inadequacy, the financial pressures that weighed on her family, and the endless scrutiny of a man who expected nothing less than perfection. Each had taught her resilience, patience, and ingenuity. But she knew instinctively that Damian's next challenge would demand more than mere competence. It would demand heart, intuition, and a refusal to compromise her principles. "Miss Carter." Damian's voice cut through the quiet, precise and commanding, yet carrying a faint undercurrent of intrigue. She stepped inside, closing the door softly behind her. He was seated at his desk, reviewing a thick stack of reports, his gray eyes scanning the pages with the intensity of a hawk observing prey. For a moment, he didn't speak, allowing the tension to settle around her like a tangible force. Then he looked up, and Riley felt the weight of his gaze. "There's been a complication," he began. "One of our key partners has decided to withdraw from the upcoming project unless certain conditions are met. The responsibility to manage this falls to you entirely. I will oversee, but the negotiation, the preparation, and the presentation, everything rests on your shoulders. Are you prepared?" Riley took a deep breath, her mind racing yet calm. "I am," she said steadily. The truth of it was undeniable. She didn't just want to survive this moment, she wanted to succeed, to prove to herself that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. Over the next several hours, Riley immersed herself in the details of the project, reviewing contracts, drafting proposals, and anticipating every possible objection the partners might raise. Each adjustment, each calculation, each word she wrote carried enormous weight. She felt the familiar pressure of expectation pressing down on her, yet it no longer paralyzed her, it energized her. Every challenge she faced reminded her why she had come here: to transform pressure into opportunity, fear into action, and adversity into growth. Damian watched quietly, occasionally interjecting with questions that tested her judgment, logic, and ability to think under pressure. Riley met each challenge without hesitation, her voice steady, her mind sharp, her focus unyielding. She realized something profound. This was more than a job. It was a proving ground for courage, integrity, and tenacity, a place where character mattered as much as skill. By late afternoon, Riley had organized a strategy, rehearsed every point, and anticipated every possible counterargument. The partners arrived, a group of executives whose confidence and experience could intimidate even seasoned negotiators. Riley stepped into the room with calm determination, her heart steady, her mind focused. Damian observed silently from the corner, allowing her the stage, knowing that the real test was not in the numbers or proposals, but in her presence, conviction, and ability to command respect under pressure. The meeting began. Riley presented her points clearly, answered objections with precision, and maintained an unwavering composure even when the discussion became tense. The partners challenged assumptions, pressed for details, and attempted to push her off balance. Each moment required focus, confidence, and the ability to adapt quickly. Riley drew on every lesson she had learned: resilience, preparation, and the courage to stand firm when stakes were high. Hours later, the meeting concluded. The partners, initially skeptical, nodded in agreement. The conditions were met, the project was saved, and the tension in the room dissipated. Damian approached her afterward, a rare expression of approval in his storm-gray eyes. "You handled that exceptionally well," he said. "Not only did you meet the expectations of skill and intelligence, but you demonstrated courage, presence, and integrity under pressure. That is what makes a difference in this world. Talent alone is not enough. Character is what determines success." Riley felt a surge of pride, but also a deeper understanding. This was more than recognition, it was affirmation that perseverance, courage, and steadfastness could overcome even the most formidable challenges. She had faced adversity, stood her ground, and emerged stronger. As she left the office that evening, the city lights shimmered below like a mosaic of endless opportunity. Riley felt a renewed sense of purpose. The challenges she faced at Cross Industries were intense, but each one revealed strength she had not known existed within her. She realized that success was not simply about surviving pressure, it was about thriving under it, transforming obstacles into opportunities, and proving, day by day, that courage and determination could shape one's destiny. And in that moment, Riley Carter knew that she was no longer just an assistant, no longer merely surviving. She was a force, resilient and unshakable, ready to face whatever the world or Damien crossed through her way. The journey ahead would be filled with trials, setbacks, and moments of doubt, but she was prepared. She would rise, she would endure, and she would not bow down. Not ever. The first snow of the season dusted the streets of the city in a quiet hush as Riley Carter hurried toward the Cross Industries building. The world outside seemed to slow, the falling flakes a contrast to the whirlwind that awaited her inside. Today was different. Today carried a weight that felt heavier than any challenge she had faced before. Damien Cross had summoned her personally, and Riley knew instinctively that this meeting would test not only her skill, but her heart. The anticipation tightened her chest, yet beneath it, determination pulsed steadily. She was ready. The lobby's familiar grandeur seemed sharper in the morning light. The marble floors gleamed under her footsteps, and the modern sculptures twisted toward the ceiling like reminders of ambition realized. Riley paused briefly, drawing a deep breath, grounding herself. Every challenge she had faced so far had built her resilience, but today's test would push her into uncharted territory. This was no longer just about strategy, precision, or skill. It was about courage in the face of personal vulnerability. "Miss Carter." Mrs. Preston called, her voice as precise and commanding as ever. Riley straightened and followed her toward the elevators, the hum of the machinery beneath her feet a subtle reminder that the journey upward was more than physical, it was symbolic. Every floor she ascended felt like a step into a deeper level of responsibility, a higher plane of expectation. When the doors opened, Damien was waiting, not seated behind his desk this time, but standing near the windows, looking out over the city. His storm-gray eyes met hers as she entered, a silent acknowledgement of the gravity of what was to come. "Miss Carter," he began, his voice calm yet weighted with unspoken meaning. "We have a sensitive situation involving the company's charitable initiative and a high-profile public relations challenge. The outcome depends entirely on how you handle it. Are you prepared to take full responsibility?" Riley's mind raced, but her voice remained steady. "I am, sir," she said. She knew this challenge would be different, more personal, more emotionally charged. It would test her integrity, her empathy, and her ability to make decisions that could affect not just the company, but the lives of those involved. Hours unfolded in a blur of analysis, planning, and careful coordination. Riley reviewed every document, every report, and every potential scenario. She had to consider not just financial outcomes, but the human impact of every choice she made. Emails flew back and forth, calls were scheduled, and every detail required her utmost attention. She felt the familiar pressure of expectation, but it no longer intimidated her, it focused her. She had learned to channel stress into clarity, doubt into preparation, and fear into determination. Damien observed quietly, interjecting with questions designed to probe her judgment and test her moral compass. "What is the ethical implication of this decision?" he asked at one point, his gaze piercing. Riley paused, considering not just the financial ramifications, but the broader human impact. "We must ensure that our actions benefit those we aim to help, without compromising transparency or accountability," she said firmly. Her words carried conviction, and she noticed a subtle shift in Damien's expression, a flicker of respect, recognition that she was more than capable of navigating complexity with integrity. By afternoon, Riley had drafted a comprehensive strategy, anticipating objections, preparing solutions, and ensuring that the initiative would not only succeed, but reflect the company's values. The high-profile stakeholders arrived, and Riley stepped into the room with quiet confidence. The discussion was intense. Every question tested her knowledge. Every objection tested her composure. Yet she remained steadfast, presenting her plan with clarity, empathy, and authority. The meeting concluded successfully. The stakeholders nodded in approval, their skepticism replaced with confidence. Riley felt a surge of pride, but also a deeper sense of fulfillment. She had faced a challenge that was not only professional but personal, one that required balancing intellect with heart, and she had prevailed. Damien approached afterward, his expression measured yet carrying unmistakable approval. "You handled this with remarkable poise," he said. "It's not only skill that defines success, it's the courage to make the right decision when the outcome is uncertain. You are learning quickly, Miss Carter, not just to succeed, but to lead with integrity and resilience." As Riley left the office that evening, the city glittered beneath the early snowfall. Her heart swelled with a sense of accomplishment, but also anticipation for what lay ahead. Each challenge, each test of skill and character, was shaping her into a person capable of standing firm in any circumstance. She understood now that true strength came from within, from the courage to face uncertainty, the determination to persist, and the willingness to act with integrity even when the stakes were high. Walking through the quiet streets, Riley felt a new certainty settle in her chest. She was no longer merely an observer of power, she was a participant, fully aware of her abilities and her limits, yet unafraid to push beyond them. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, she felt truly ready to meet whatever challenges awaited. She would rise, endure, and excel not because it was expected of her, but because she had chosen to stand her ground, no matter the cost. And in that moment, Riley Carter realized the truth that would guide her for the rest of her journey. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. Every challenge she faced would test her, but she knew now that nothing could break her resolve. She was prepared for whatever came next, confident in the strength she had discovered within herself. The morning sun cut through the city like shards of gold, illuminating the streets below and casting long shadows into the towering walls of Cross Industries. Riley Carter stood at the base of the building, her breath visible in the crisp air, her mind racing. Today was different. The challenges she had faced so far were stepping stones, each building her confidence, sharpening her skills, and testing her courage. But this day carried a weight unlike any other. Damien Cross had scheduled a meeting that was more than strategic. It was a trial of vision, judgment, and resilience. Riley felt a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation, a reminder that true growth often emerged from the pressure of the impossible. As she entered the familiar lobby, Riley's eyes traced the sleek lines of the architecture, the gleaming floors, and the sculpted art that had always seemed to mock her in their perfection. Today, however, it did not intimidate her. She had walked these halls, endured the scrutiny, met challenges head-on, and learned that strength was forged in the crucible of expectation. Every step toward the elevator was measured, deliberate, a declaration that she was no longer just stepping into an office. She was stepping into her own power. "Miss Carter," Mrs. Preston said, her voice crisp as ever, though with the faintest hint of approval this time. Riley nodded, stepping into the elevator, feeling the familiar hum beneath her as it carried her upward. Each floor passed with the rhythm of inevitability, and when the doors opened to the 42nd floor, Damien was waiting. He did not rise, nor did he speak immediately. His storm-gray eyes met hers, sharp, piercing, but carrying the faintest glimmer of recognition, acknowledgement that Riley was no longer the cautious newcomer she had been. "There's a situation," he began, his tone measured, yet layered with unspoken stakes. "We are at a critical juncture in the company. A potential merger could transform the entire enterprise, but it hinges on negotiations that will be watched closely by the public, investors, and media alike. One misstep could mean loss, but one well-executed strategy could mean unprecedented success. The responsibility for coordinating this, preparing our approach, and ensuring flawless execution falls to you. Are you ready?" Riley's chest tightened for a moment, but she straightened her shoulders, met his gaze evenly, and said, "I am ready, sir." She knew that this was not just another assignment. It was a culmination of every lesson, every challenge, and every test she had endured. Her mind immediately organized priorities, communication, analysis, strategy, and precision. Every detail mattered, and every decision would echo far beyond this office. The hours that followed were relentless. Riley dove into reports, financial statements, and correspondence, synthesizing complex information and anticipating every scenario. She coordinated with multiple departments, ensured that every document was meticulously prepared, and rehearsed presentations that demanded not just accuracy but clarity, confidence, and poise. Damien observed quietly, occasionally interjecting, with questions designed to probe her insight and judgment. Each question was a test, each observation a challenge, yet Riley responded with unwavering focus, her confidence growing with each successful step. By late afternoon, the negotiation meeting began. Riley led the preparation, ensuring every detail was addressed, every contingency planned. The room was tense with the weight of expectations, but she moved with a calm authority that belied the magnitude of the stakes. Damien observed silently, recognizing that her presence, preparation, and composure were as critical as the figures and strategies she presented. The negotiations were intense. Stakeholders questioned assumptions, tested proposals, and pressed for guarantees that seemed impossible to provide. Yet Riley maintained control. She listened carefully, adapted quickly, and responded with clarity, logic, and calm decisiveness. She anticipated objections before they were voiced and provided solutions that were both innovative and practical. With each exchange, confidence rippled through the room, both hers and the stakeholders. Hours later, the meeting concluded with resounding success. The merger was approved, the company's future secured, and the stakeholders left the room, impressed by the seamless coordination and strategic vision demonstrated by Riley. Damien finally spoke, his voice carrying a rare note of approval. "You have exceeded expectations," he said, his gaze steady. "Not only did you demonstrate intelligence, skill, and preparation, but you also showed courage, leadership, and the ability to inspire confidence under immense pressure. That is the mark of true excellence." Riley felt a surge of pride and fulfillment. Yet beneath it lay a deeper realization. Success was not merely about outcomes, but about the journey, the persistence, and the courage to rise when the stakes were highest. Each challenge she had faced, the demanding schedules, the high-pressure meetings, the scrutiny, and the uncertainty, had prepared her for this moment. She had learned to trust herself, act decisively, and stand firm in her convictions, no matter the opposition. As she left the office that evening, the city stretched beneath her in a tapestry of lights and possibility. Riley knew that she had transformed. She was no longer the tentative young woman who had walked into Cross Industries months ago. She was a force, resilient, capable, and unshakable. She had faced adversity, met power with courage, and proven that integrity, determination, and unwavering resolve could shape destiny. Walking through the quiet streets, the realization settled deep in her chest. Every obstacle she had overcome had been a step toward her true self, and while the future would undoubtedly present new challenges, Riley Carter knew one unshakable truth: she would face them with the same courage, resilience, and refusal to bow down that had carried her through every trial. She was ready, she was capable, she was unstoppable.